If you've ever watched any of Vivziepop shows, you'll have heard of her many dramas. Anytime she's mentioned, people always bring these up regardless of the context, and to the average viewer, it can put you off engaging with her creations. A year ago, I made a video compiling, discussing, and debunking most of these. However, with Hazbin Hotel having finally released, and a bunch more drama happening, I thought it would be about time to make a sequel to my first video. Vivzie has an extensive online history, so if I discussed absolutely everything, even the minor dramas, we'd be here all day. So I'll focus on the main ones that people bring up regularly. The video will be structured in 3 sections, starting with the oldest dramas, moving to the recent stuff, and lastly finishing off with my concluding thoughts. If you're looking for a specific situation, feel free to use the video chapters feature or check the description to skip to that part. Zoophobia. There's a variety of controversies related to Vivzie's old webcomic Zoophobia. The first is related to a character called Addison. Vivzie drew art of Addison in several positions, the most infamous being one where he's depicted in a bath of snakes. For a while, people debated over the legitimacy of these images despite Viv's watermark being on them. The age of Addison is quite confusing. According to Viv, the character is 18, however the fan-run wiki had their age listed as 17 for several years. You can't take fan-run wikis at face value since they can be edited by anyone. As a result, I'm more inclined to believe the artist more than anyone else on this one. Addison was also depicted in a relationship with Gustav, a teacher's assistant who is 19. The main criticism here is that there's a power imbalance at play. Viv addressed these situations during her 2018 Tumblr apology, where she says the cringy art was made in 2012 when she was 19 years old, and she affirms that it wasn't illegal then and isn't now. After taking a look, I definitely believe the art is amoral and degenerate. However, I think the saving grace is that Vivzie herself apologised. She took accountability, apologised, and hasn't drawn anything similar to this since. It was 10 years ago as well, so I don't think it should be held over her head forever. The second controversy to do with Zoophobia is related to 2 characters being Kestrel and Mirage. Kestrel is 14, while Mirage is 27. In one art piece, Mirage is being creepy to Kestrel with her mouth watering. I would say that to someone who has never seen the show before, this can be perceived in a bad way, especially with the hearts in the speech bubbles. However, once you look more into the show, you will find out that Mirage is the villain and that they have no romantic connection whatsoever. The art piece is meant to highlight that Mirage is a creepy, manipulative character, akin to characters we've seen in other shows such as King Jellybean in Rick and Morty. I don't think this is bad either. Viv hasn't made any art shipping the pair, and Mirage is canonically a villain. If Mirage was depicted as a character to support or look up to, then perhaps you could hold Viv accountable. But this is nothing. Tracing. This point will be linked in with the last one, but years ago Vivzie was called out for tracing or plagiarising. The art pieces vary from some frames from old movies to old memes. If you compare the images side by side, you'll see that they're not traces, but are deliberately made to pay homage to the original piece. There's nothing wrong with paying homage to things you like, so I wouldn't call this a proper criticism either. Dollcreep. Dollcreep, or Joe, was an old friend of Vivzie's, dating back to at least 2012, with Vivzie meeting them in real life at one point. Vivzie purchased several original characters from Doll, such as Gigi, Gunter, and Elijah. At some point in 2012, the pair had a falling out. The timeline gets a little messy, but Viv and Doll fell out, and this led to a toxic back and forth between them for several years. Both creators made call-out threads and bizarre caricatures of each other. At some point, Dollcreep started to resell the designs that Viv had purchased to other people, and we can see this firsthand on Doll's website, where underneath Gigi it says that it was sold to someone else. This complicated everything obviously, since reselling characters someone else has already purchased is a huge no-no. There's several characters that Viv made that bear a striking resemblance to characters made by Dollcreep. There aren't any archives or info since it was so long ago, so either Viv purchased these characters as well or nabbed the designs for herself. Unfortunately, the whole reselling character situation just poisoned the well, so we'll never know. Viv made the Die Young music video featuring Gigi the werewolf. Dollcreep was angry because they were only given a special thanks credit in the outro of the video. After this, Vivzie decided to rename Gigi to JJ and give her a new design. This was also to be reflected in a sequel video called JJ Returns, but that video was never made. In 2017, Dollcreep made a huge apology post. They apologised to Viv and said how Viv had talked to him and the other user that designs were sold to, and everyone is happy and the drama is behind them. They finish off the post saying they're sorry about everything and that they're ditching their usernames. The situation, as Dollcreep said, has been resolved. It's pretty clear that both Viv and Doll were extremely immature, and this happened a decade ago. I don't think either of them should be raked over the coals for this, especially when they worked it out and it was a decade ago. Neither party is in the wrong, they both owned up to their mistakes and worked things out, which is very mature of them both. Sausage Party. Back in 2016, Vivzie was a massive fan of the animated comedy film Sausage Party that released that same year. She ran a Tumblr side blog called Busted Nas, where she would post fan art about the show along with a couple original characters. So first up, she did art of this character from the film. It's mentioned in the image as well, but the pose is a reference to the Mel Brooks musical comedy film called The Producers that pokes fun at the Third Reich. Underneath the image, we can see the caption showing that it's an art trade with a person called I Hate Juice, a reference to several lines from the Sausage Party film. Personally, I don't really see what the issue is. The art is based on a comedy film that pokes fun at the dictator. It doesn't glamorize him or the Third Reich at all. People also criticised Viv for doing an art trade with the user with the dodgy username. Again, it's a bit from the movie. Both blogs are gone, but I don't think drawing fan art is the same as endorsing the party. You can disapprove of the username definitely, but I don't see how Viv is anti-Semitic for doing an art trade with this person. Vivzie also had an original character which was a cannibal candy cane. Another Tumblr user had an in-universe version of the evil scientist called Dr. Mengele. In one art piece, Viv drew her candy cane OC blushing with this Dr. Mengele character. Overall, my take is that the entire thing is bizarre. I don't know why Viv would waste time drawing fanart and creating these OCs in the first place. Can you criticise her for doing these art trades with these people? Absolutely. But at least to me, this happened 8 years ago in 2016. As many people have brought up, 2016 was the peak time for edgy comedy and jokes, with examples like Filthy Frank, PewDiePie and iDubbbz. There's no images of her saying anti-Semitic rhetoric or endorsing the dictator. She drew dumb fan art, probably regretted it, and then deleted the blog. You can absolutely criticise her for creating this blog, but to go as far as to say that she's racist or anti-Semitic is a stretch. Blair White and ShoeonHead fan art. In 2016, Vivzie drew fan art for ShoeonHead and Blair White. These two people are political YouTubers. Their political allegiances will vary based on who you ask, but the general consensus is that they're both right-wing. When one Twitter user replied to Viv with an image of Blair White doing blackface, Viv responded saying how discussion is important, but she doesn't cater to them. Viv mentioned this during her 2018 apology. In particular, she says she didn't follow either of these YouTubers, so she didn't know the insensitive jokes that they make. She mentioned some of the tough situations she was encountering in her life, and said that seeing two controversial women speaking their minds was admirable. She finishes off saying she doesn't endorse them then and doesn't now. Personally, I don't think Viv is in the wrong here. She made the fan art and apologised after. Like the previous point, this was 8 years ago. She disavowed the channels and apologised. I don't really see what else is to be done. With the older stuff covered, it's time to discuss the things that have happened within the last couple of years. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. Scott Cawthon. In June 2021, it was discovered that the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott Cawthon, had been making political donations to a number of controversial politicians. The discourse exploded on sites like Twitter, and Vivziepop made a couple replies about it. Fans of Five Nights at Freddy's were extremely upset, and as a result Vivziepop got doxxed. There was a bit of misinformation around this situation, with people saying that Scott got doxxed as a result of Vivzie, which is false. Scott and his wife were doxxed several days before Vivzie made her tweets. Again, I don't really see what the issue is here. People acted like Vivzie did a heinous crime by giving her opinion about politics on Twitter. You can absolutely criticise her for using her personal account to discuss these topics. However, it crosses the line when someone gets doxxed for literally no reason. Fans follow her for updates on the show or to see her daily life, so it's understandable it can be a bit jarring if she discusses these complex issues. However, neither Vivziepop nor Scott should have been doxxed. It's unfortunate that people can't calmly discuss politics without resorting to threats and harassment. Vivzie made a couple tweets and got doxxed. I don't really see how she's the villain here. If anything, she's a victim, and it further proves how large of an audience of people are out to get her. Erin Frost. On June 22nd, 2022, a former Spindlehorse employee named Erin Frost made a post on their Tumblr blog. They made several accusations that Vivziepop is a toxic boss that abuses her employees and insults other creators. Some allegations included being overworked to meet deadlines and insulting animators on their shows. Shortly after, multiple Spindlehorse employees came out saying how good their experience was at the company, directly contrasting what Erin said. Since there was no screenshots or proof combined with the opinions from the Spindle staff, people mainly wrote these accusations off. A couple months later in October, Erin returned with a follow-up. She starts off showing how she was sent a cease and desist notice from Viv. She then made a bunch of tweets about her experiences and then showed screenshots with various team members. Accompanying this info was a large Google Doc, again reiterating her experiences. Once people went through everything, there was a couple issues with the document. The conversation with Adam lacked context. It showed Erin giving Adam a document about some of the issues she faced and them hopping in a call, but we don't know what happened next. The conversation with Jane showed her leaking a chat to someone else, which was definitely the wrong thing to do, but again the issue was with this particular artist, not Viv or Spindlehorse as a whole. And during the final situation, which involved Sam, Erin showcased in the DMs how she took on too many jobs at once and wasn't able to complete deadlines on time. It wasn't Sam or the company's fault, just Erin, because she took on too much work. After these posts were made, people criticised Erin for name-dropping other ex-employees. Although there may have been some sort of beef behind the scenes, the images attached didn't really corroborate that and came off as quite spiteful. In November, Erin returned for a third time. This time, Erin says that Viv was attempting to get her blacklisted from the industry. The first piece of evidence was a Discord message from Ashley Nichols, a YouTuber, artist, and creator of indie show Farfetched, saying that Viv told her not to hire Erin. The second image shows an anonymous artist trying to work for Nico Colaleo, creator of show Ollie and Scoops. Nico asks the user to double check with Viv if they can work for them, so that they're not taking on too many jobs at once. The user asks Viv and she gives the go ahead. Nico thanks them and adds them to a list of potential people he'd like to work with. And lastly, we have a message from Vivziepop to Dave Capdevielle, who helped write the Hazbin Hotel pilot and is a writer for Farfetched. Viv asks Dave to hire people outside her crew because too many people are applying and working on both shows, causing issues with people hitting deadlines. People criticised Erin for getting extremely hostile in her attitude and for leaking private DMs without consent. The blacklisting point was also under scrutiny, since the DMs made sense, since as Nico and Viv said, several employees took on too much work and couldn't meet deadlines, thereby holding the entire process back. It makes logical sense to ask employees to not work multiple jobs. In May, Erin Frost returned, this time to criticise the portrayal of trans character Sally Mae in Hell of a Boss. Erin said that one of Millie's brothers that she designed was meant to be trans, but after she left Spindle, they changed this and Sally Mae was instead made to be trans. Erin also criticised the amount of merch featuring Sally Mae, saying it was trans fetishization. Morgana Ignis, Sally Mae's VA, came out against Frost, saying Sally Mae was always trans, and that she's a body-positive trans character, so there's nothing wrong with the merch. A couple months later, Erin Frost made a couple final tweets before leaving the website. Allegedly, Erin and several other past employees formed a Discord server to take down Vivziepop and Spindlehorse. Erin seemingly went off the rails and tweeted out a Google Drive folder featuring statements from several employees without their consent. The document included personal information for her and Vivzie, so she basically doxed Viv and herself. After this, Erin deleted her Twitter and hasn't been seen since. From start to finish, the situation was incredibly complex. In my opinion, Erin's stance got worse as time went on. If she had perhaps made a post or a couple tweets with proper evidence saying some of the issues with the company, then that would have been fine. However, she didn't have any proof with her original statements, and when she did include proof, they either didn't corroborate her points or actively made her look worse. And lastly, with the Sally Mae discourse and the doc situation, she basically dug her own grave, realised the situation was unsalvageable, and left the internet. Lackadaisy. In July 2023, Viv donated $5,000 to a fundraiser meant to give the Lackadaisy franchise a 5-episode first season on YouTube, after the success of the pilot in March of the same year, while also voicing her opinion that indie animation should not be a competition. Later, an animator on Lackadaisy known as Z Birdbrain left a passive-aggressive remark under Medrano's post for not including the link to the fundraiser, and made it out to seem that Viv only donated as a PR stunt. This led to many people calling out Z for unprofessionalism and called for her to either be reprimanded or let go from the Lackadaisy team. It reached a point where some Helliverse fans have stated that they refused to support Lackadaisy because they were so put off by the passive aggression and rudeness on Z's part. She would later delete her tweet instead of apologising, leading to people calling her out again for ignoring the incident. A little later, apparent Discord messages surfaced showing Z criticising Viv, saying she only donated for clout and to associate herself with the project. This set the barrels alight and everything kicked off. Once people tweeted about this situation, several Lackadaisy team members came out in defence of Z. These staff members also began to block Twitter users mentioning the situation at all, which stirred the pot. On August 2023, Vivzie's pledge was cancelled for unknown reasons, with fans speculating that it was from the Lackadaisy crew disassociating themselves from Viv and any potential drama. Shortly after, an apology was made from the Lackadaisy team in the official Discord server. The apology says that neither Lackadaisy nor Z are transphobic and elaborates a little about the situation, and lastly says that they chose to rescind the pledge, but they don't elaborate on why. My take is that the situation is extremely bizarre and the Lackadaisy team were in the wrong. It's evident that several Lackadaisy team members had some sort of issue with Viv or Spindlehorse as a whole. You might have picked up on this in the previous situation when Ashley Nichols was caught leaking Discord DMs to Erin Frost. People falling out happens all the time, however these attitudes clearly bled over into other projects. The pledge should have never been cancelled, and Z shouldn't have made the bizarre accusations of clout chasing. Instead, the pledge was cancelled, several team members were running defense on Twitter, and anyone who discussed it had their tweets dumped in a group chat or server where they were blocked en masse by the whole team. It's a sad situation overall. KenDraws. In May 2023, KenDraws came out with a document against Vivzie. Included are a bunch of Discord exchanges between Viv and Ken ranging between 2017 and 2020. The main things mentioned are the fact that Viv heavily referenced the cherry bomb pose made by Ken and didn't credit them on her Patreon, Vivzie only giving Ken the additional writing credit in the pilot outro, Viv using incorrect pronouns when referring to Ken, and being pushy when trying to get Ken to sign a document so that Viv can own all of the rights to Hazbin Hotel. There were several issues with the document, such as Ken leaving out important bits of info or huge bits of text being presented without context. The fact that Ken held onto these messages for several years didn't look good either. Ken said that they helped with the writing, however after looking through the messages they only did a couple Discord roleplays with Viv. The writing they helped with wasn't too significant and additional writing was a perfectly suitable credit. The issue surrounding signing over the rights looked bad at face value, however Ken forgot to include how prior to the first set of DMs they were given several weeks to get a lawyer and sign the document. To most people it looked like they were being unreasonable and stalling the process for seemingly no reason. And lastly, the Discord DMs where Viv misgendered them, Viv used the correct pronouns at the start and then drifted into using the wrong pronouns. To many users this was seen as Viv getting flustered, distracted or emotional, causing her to accidentally use the wrong pronouns. So overall Viv should have credited Ken in the Patreon post. However, that's the only wrongdoing. The entire thing was framed like a hit piece, but actually had no weight at all. Patreon. There were two situations involving Viv's Patreon. Firstly, Viv had a secondary Patreon that was only for films. In 2019, a user asked her about it, to which Viv said it was abandoned, and then later Viv eventually deleted it. Once this was unearthed, many users said that Viv was scamming people or collecting users' money. Well, if these people had any critical thinking skills at all and read the page, they'd realise that Viv would only get paid once the animation was out. It was set up to only take money from patrons once the film animation was posted. Since none was posted, no users lost any money. So this is another case of people getting angry for no reason and not having a clue what they're talking about. The second situation involves a disagreement Viv had with a patron in their Discord server. Another YouTuber called Iox made a wonderful video on this topic. But the short and sweet of it is that one user wanted a full refund after pledging for the $50 tier. According to the user, their roommate ate them out of house and home, so they wanted Viv to give them a refund. Viv said that if she makes exceptions by refunding, then people can abuse the system to get her out for free, and that user also joined patron-only calls. So if it was refunded, they got a bunch of perks for no cost whatsoever. When Vivzie and another user questioned them and asked if the roommate could pay, the user realised their tactics weren't working and they gave up, saying for Viv to keep the money. Viv and the user apologised to each other and that's it. So the situation is another nothing burger. The fault lied with the roommate for eating all of the person's food. If you're in financial difficulty, spending the last of your money on a Patreon isn't a good decision whatsoever. The dismissive attitude of the user and the fact that this was dug up 7 years after the fact shows that there was malpractice involved. The user clearly had the situation living rent-free in their head for 7 years, so they dug it up later to try and damage Viv's reputation. Proshipping. Vivziepop and one of her employees called Raf have been accused of proshipping. There's a bunch of context, so I'll break it down. Users criticised Vivzie and the show for episode 4 of Hazbin Hotel, which featured the infamous Poison song. The graphic imagery led to people saying the scene was fetishising SA and abuse. Criticism was levied against Raf, one of the artists who worked on the scene. Raf draws art shipping Valentina with angel dust and has dead dove do not eat in their bio, basically warning users that they draw and discuss graphic topics. A tweet was brought up where Viv and Raf expressed how they wanted to buy pin sets that showed Angel and Husk in chains. After discourse started, Viv went to threads to defend herself and Raf, stating that Raf is an SA victim, so they're allowed to draw such art as a coping mechanism. People then found a playlist on Vivzie's old YouTube channel that featured some graphic videos. Although the videos don't explicitly show SA, the thumbnails alone are quite dodgy and it left a poor taste in many people's mouths. With all of this combined together, it painted a bit of a troubling picture. In my opinion, I don't think the Poison song fetishised abuse. I thought it handled the topic well and it made me uncomfortable while watching, which was the point. I don't believe it glamorised or downplayed it at all. As for whether or not Raf or Vivzie are pro-shippers, I don't believe Vivzie is one, but I think Raf can be classified as one. On one hand, people argue that since Raf is a victim and the art doesn't hurt anyone, then they should be allowed to draw it. On the flip side, people argue that their personal fetishes bled into the show. People wanted Raf fired, which is a step too far. I think if they want to draw this art as a coping mechanism, they should keep it to a private account. Making it public for everyone to see just adds fuel to the fire and can reflect badly on the show. It's up to you, the viewer, to make your mind up for this one. Alastor Voodoo. For the next couple of situations, I'll discuss some characters in Hazbin Hotel. the first being Alastor. Since the release of the pilot, there's been some criticism for Alastor's voodoo imagery. Once the full show came out, the situation exploded on Twitter. The main gist of the controversy is that people were angry that Viv depicted Alastor with voodoo symbols. Many people said Viv was engaging in cultural appropriation, misrepresenting voodoo, and was also demonizing it for profit. It was also mentioned that voodoo is a closed religion, so you need permission to practice it. People said that since Vivzie was a Latina, she had no right to depict voodoo in her show, and that she and the show were racist as a result. On the contrary, people fought against these claims, citing that Alastor is mixed-race Creole, so he's allowed to practice voodoo since he was likely born into a family that practiced it. People mentioned how voodoo has been shown in countless films and pieces of media, and that the vast majority of the ones complaining don't practice voodoo and are just gatekeeping it. It was also argued that the depiction of voodoo isn't necessarily bad in Hazbin Hotel. It takes place in hell and Alastor is an anti-hero sort of character. However, its presence doesn't automatically mean it's bad. In my opinion, I can see where people are coming from. However, Viv has every right to give Alastor these traits, provided it makes sense. Alastor has the backstory to back it up, and I don't think he's perpetuating stereotypes or anything like that. This was mentioned countless times in other videos and posts, but it's a bit weird for people to be fine with the show depicting other religions. However, as soon as voodoo is in the spotlight, it's suddenly off limits. Alastor is an extremely complicated character, with probably the most overloaded lore out of the entire cast. If people want to say that perhaps he should have fantasy symbols, maybe related to him being the radio demon, I think that's completely fair. However, to say Vivzie and the show as a whole are racist is a huge stretch. Pentious received criticism after the finale of Hazbin Hotel. According to some anonymous Discord users, Pentious was based on Vivzie's old friend Dollcreep, who I mentioned earlier in the video. The statements made were that Pentious was based on Dollcreep physically and was beaten around by Vivzie's Gary Stu OC Alastor. One of the egg boys that died had the number 23, which is Dollcreep's favourite number. A tweet Vivzie liked about one of Pentious' scenes in episode 6 was also brought up. People mentioned that Gooseworks apparently helped Viv make the character. I wasn't able to find any evidence of this, just a couple tweets of Goose saying how she loved Pentious and the fact that she made his theme song. So when I first saw this tweet, I was shocked by how little critical thinking skills people have. The entire thing is made up nonsense, operating off what a couple random censored Discord users are saying. My favourite bit is the fact that Dollcreep's favourite number is apparently 23. It's actually gone past the point of conspiracy theory nonsense, it's actual lunacy. Underneath one of these posts, the OP immediately started shilling their webcomic, which again puts the entire thing into question. If someone puts forward a serious allegation, then immediately starts advertising their art, then it just gives off the impression that they are social climbing and don't care about the topic they're advocating for. Why grow an audience organically when you can screenshot some garbage from a mate's Discord server, farm thousands of Twitter likes, and then advertise your art? There were a couple more alleged DMs from Dollcreep, where again it censored Discord DMs with no proof or context whatsoever. They're basically taking credit for Vivziepop liking pinstripe suits and top hats. This controversy is just fabricated. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Dollcreep apologised and said how Viv and them worked things out and moved on. These Twitter users are grave digging, and it's just a slap in the face to Doll, because they likely don't want involved whatsoever. If they do want involved and those 2020 Discord DMs are real, then that's just pretty low of them to do so. They said they were done with everything back in their apology, so if they're still angry about it all these years later, it comes off as a bit obsessed or stalkery. Mimzy. For several years, people have criticised Mimzy for being an alleged anti-Semitic stereotype. The main criticisms being that she is fat, has a hooked nose, and is materialistic. Once the full show came out, people mentioned how during episode 5, where Mimzy is introduced, the cast finds her annoying and she immediately leaves the hotel. This one, like the previous, makes no sense. There's no evidence to suggest Mimzy is Jewish, and I don't know where this came from. If you see a short, chubby woman with a hooked nose and immediately think they're Jewish, then that says a lot more about you than it does Vivzie or the show. They're basically perpetuating stereotypes. As we saw in the show, Mimzy is a 1920s flapper girl who owed 50k to some loan sharks and Alastor fought them off. There's nothing to indicate that she's Jewish, and this controversy makes no sense. It's just another case of people nitpicking and seeing issues that aren't actually there. Adam. During episode 8, Adam is unmasked and we see his face. Users complained that he was not biblically accurate and that he was a white man. The answer to this is that Adam's design was based on his voice actor Alex Brightman. The bit was that people were expecting an evil character, however when Adam was unmasked he just looked like an ordinary dude. It was made that way to subvert our expectations, and the fact that he resembled Alex Brightman was a fun reference. Discord Transphobia. There's been a variety of Discord DMs released that allegedly show Vivziepop talking about a variety of topics. The first image shows DMs of Vivzie allegedly repeatedly badmouthing Kyra Kupetsky, creator of Chicken Nugget. According to Viv, the two of them have been shit-talking each other, so there's some sort of beef going on. In image 2, we see more DMs from Viv talking about Kyra. In image 3, we see Vivzie talking about some anonymous person. These screenshots were taken using Discord compact mode, which is why the formatting is weird. Viv talks about the personality of this person, how they're agender, among other things, and how Viv thinks that they're doing it for show. In image 4, we see Vivziepop criticizing Fable, who is the director on Lackadaisy. So, with the images shown, let's discuss them. The first thing is that there's no evidence or proof to back up the legitimacy of these screenshots. Similarly to the Pentious Discord DMs, we're forced to operate off the belief that they're real. However, whoever circulated these DMs have every intention of misleading people. The names of whoever Viv is talking to are censored out, so, judging off the context, Viv is trash-talking people, and then the user is endorsing or agreeing with her. Who is this anonymous individual? Why are they facilitating this behaviour? We have no idea, because they conveniently censored everything. The context before and after every screenshot is completely absent. We can't make a definitive statement without knowing the context. As we've seen in past situations involving dodgy censored screenshots, such as with Quite, Paracynical, or Slazo, it's important to make sure that the DMs are real and of proper context before and after. I've seen people say that these DMs are the nail in the coffin and the silver-tipped bullet, but that's false. The thing is, we'll probably never find out if they're real or fake, because like I mentioned, based off what little context we have, the people engaging in these conversations are just as bad, if not worse, than Viv. However, if they came out to verify these screenshots, they'd be implicating themselves as well, which they're not going to do. Hazbin Recast. Back in December 2021, the entire Hazbin Hotel cast was recast. At the time, information was vague, with people not knowing what the exact reason was. People spread theories that Viv fell out with the main cast or that it was caused by A24. Viv has said since in a couple interviews that she wanted a Broadway cast, so it seemed like that was the most likely option. Recently, a tribute song was made by Black Griffin, which featured most of the pilot cast. In the comments, Black Griffin made a pinned comment elaborating on a couple of questions he was receiving. He states that the pilot cast was recast because Vivzie wanted a Broadway cast. Monica Franco declined to voice Vaggie, and Ed Bosco didn't voice in it because it could be a conflict of interest since he voices Stryker in Hell of a Boss. Griffin says that him and the rest of the pilot cast weren't invited to the premiere, but they all still support Viv on the show regardless. There was also an apparent leaked message from Discord group chat about Viv recasting everyone. There's no way to verify if it's real or not, but I saw people bring it up, so I'll throw it on screen. After this, a couple tweets blew up, basically saying that Viv threw the pilot cast under the bus and was threatening people to not take part in the video. Personally, I disagree. Viv wanted a Broadway cast and she has every right to do that. It's complicated because I think a lot of people would agree with me that some of the pilot voice actors were better than the ones in the final show. However, this works in the inverse, where several of the final voice actors fit the characters better than in the pilot. The pilot was a work in progress thing, so it makes sense that changes happen. People were saying that the pilot cast have beef with Viv, which I don't agree with at all. A lot of them were very supportive of the new cast, like Michael Kovac and Mick Lahr congratulating their new replacements. Why did Ed and Monica decline to voice in the video? Well, we don't know, but they have every right to. Where the issue falls is on the invitations to the screening and the recast itself. I personally think Viv should have absolutely invited the pilot voice cast to the premiere. They were really important in the early success of the show, and although they unfortunately weren't picked, the least that can be done is invite them. It'll allow them to reminisce on old times, take photographs, and establish a friendly atmosphere. Secondly, I think the recast should have been announced back in 2021. At the time, Viv was silent, which caused a lot of issues. If she'd came out saying that she wanted a Broadway cast with a simple announcement post, I think it would have been a way smoother transition. People obviously would have reacted harshly and been annoyed, but I think the vast majority of people would respect her decision. It's also worth mentioning that Vivzie was likely under an NDA by A24 or Amazon Prime. This likely complicated things, since Viv and the cast would want to clarify things, however they can't break their contract. Both the pilot and the final cast are wonderful. However, I think the way the recast was handled could have been better and it could have avoided a lot of heartache as well. With all of the situations covered, it's time to get into my concluding thoughts. My opinion has more or less stayed the same as what I said in my original video about Vivzie. However, I'll break it down into 3 main points. Firstly, as you've seen throughout this video, the vast majority of Vivzie's controversies are complete nothing burgers. Several of them were so long ago that they don't matter, most were debunked, and only a couple are genuine criticisms. You may disagree with me on some of these, which is completely fair. However, I think most logical people will look at these situations, realise Viv isn't nearly as bad as people make her out to be, and then move on with their day. 2. Vivziepop has made some mistakes over the years. One example being how she responds to criticism. For several years, Viv had a hard time responding to criticism by blocking people or creating long reply tweet threads, which made things worse. It's completely understandable that Viv acts this way because it's mentally draining to have this much stuff spread about you on a weekly basis. However, I think that by now she's learned that the only thing that can be done is to just ignore it and focus on creating her shows. And number 3, it has become trendy to bash Viv and the shows. There's an entire community of people that are dedicated to tearing Viv and her community down. I've seen people say that they were kicked out of friend groups or harassed for just liking the shows. There's groups of people who spend every waking moment complaining about Viv and her creations. If you've been on Twitter or Tumblr, you'll know exactly what I mean. It causes almost like a tunnel vision, where you see issues that aren't really there. Nobody else can see these issues because they don't exist. However, because people don't listen to this vocal minority over on Twitter, they get increasingly angry and more hostile as time goes on. There's no real way to solve this issue, unfortunately, but it's important to not let their moaning damage your enjoyment of the shows. This isn't really a point, but I'd like to add that some people have just gotten tired of Vivzie due to the writing of the shows and whatnot. Not all of the haters of the shows are malicious, and most people know this. There is, unfortunately, some people who don't take too kindly to criticism whatsoever. I had a situation where I discussed some of the lore and writing issues with Helvaboss in a dedicated video. One deranged fan proceeded to go on Twitter and message several people saying that I hate Vivziepop and the shows and that they should do call-out threads on me. That's just the unfortunate thing about the internet. Both critics and fans are able to discuss these topics calmly. However, it's these outlier crazy people who poison the well and make discourse toxic, which as a result ruins it for everyone. I saw a lot of people share my first video around and use it as a citation, which was nice to see. So feel free to do the same with this one if it helps to provide context to Vivzie and her many dramas. So that's everything I wanted to say. If you agree with my takes or have any thoughts on the subject, I'd love for you to leave them in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching.